Hello everybody, in today's video we're going to be going over some severe storms which are going to be heading into the southern plains for today and also into tomorrow. It looks like you might get a break in the evening hours on Wednesday, but then we might see a little bit more storminess on Thursday. So it's going to just continue and continue over this area. We're also dealing with a lot of warm air being pushed into the central and northern United States as well. So finally the area of chilly air is moving out. It's heading further and further south. And that warmer, milder air is pushing back into the central and eastern United States. So here's what the current National Weather Service page looks like. You can see it is actually quite active, especially out further to the west. So you can see we have a few wind advisories along the west coast, as well as some frost advisories in northwestern California. We have red flag warnings in effect for southern Utah and some freeze warnings in effect for northern Washington and northern Idaho. We have winter storm watches in parts of northwestern Montana, as well as a few more wind alerts in northern Montana as well. We have also in parts of Texas, Louisiana, Arkansas, and Oklahoma some flood watches that are currently in place over those areas. Yesterday, we had a high temperature in Rio Grande Village, Texas, where they got up to 106 degrees Fahrenheit, and the low temperatures were both actually in Arizona, of all places, in the Grand Canyon and also in Sunset Crater, Arizona. Both those areas got down to 25 degrees Fahrenheit. The highest rainfall precipitation report was in Hominy, Oklahoma, where they got 5.02 inches of rainfall, and the highest snowfall report was 3 miles east-southeast of Fort Garland, Colorado, where they got 7.5 inches of rainfall. So here's what the current radar looks like, and you can see we actually do have a couple of pockets of heavy rainfall or steady rainfall at least. We have one that's spanning into central and northern Texas, so just west of Dallas there is where we're dealing with most of that rainfall. And then also another area, unfortunately, in southern Louisiana, which has really been taking the brunt of this rainfall. They've seen multiple inches of rainfall over the past 7 days. We're actually going to talk about that in just one moment. You can see here in southwestern Louisiana, we have some of that steady, heavy rainfall in that area. Luckily, the heaviest of the rainfall is actually offshore, so we're not dealing with any of that moving onshore, but some still steady rainfall, which has been sitting over that same area, is still occurring over these areas. Here's the total rainfall that's been observed over the past 7 days. So this is going from the 11th all the way until this morning, and you can see that we have total rainfall amounts, especially in coastal Texas and southern Louisiana, that are between about 3 inches and all the way up to over 10 inches in that purple shade, that first shade of purple and pink. That's where you're above 10 inches. We even have a few reports up to 15 inches of rainfall in the past 7 days. And if we look at what that is compared to your normal, anywhere that's in that kind of lightest shade of blue, which is this color right here, what you see in southern Louisiana, that's 5 times what you typically see within this 7-day period or higher. We even have some areas averaging up to 17 times their weekly average precipitation in some of these areas. So these are really high amounts of rainfall and precipitation, and you can see how it's mainly been in the eastern half of Texas and also back into southern Louisiana especially, and especially the most above normal has been this coastal area in Texas and Louisiana. So this is the area that's been hit the hardest, and you guys are going to actually see another couple rounds of heavy rainfall. So unfortunately that is the case, and it looks like this probably will die down by another maybe couple days, but we still have to go through another few days of rainfall before we actually get over all of this storminess in parts of especially eastern and central Texas. Also, here are the storm reports from yesterday. We actually did see quite a few tornadoes. We had 21 tornadoes. We had 31 wind reports. We had 49 reports of hail, and I believe there were actually a couple that were over an inch and a half diameter. So really high, really large hailstones that we saw, especially in western Texas, eastern New Mexico, eastern Colorado. Those areas were really the bullseye for the severe weather yesterday. Even though in parts of eastern Texas and Louisiana, you don't see too much in the way of storm reports, most of the reports were actually in terms of flooding, because that was the main concern. Not really anything in terms of winds, tornadoes, or hail, but just flooding concerns were the main issues in those regions. Here's what the current Storm Prediction Center page looks like. You can see that we have a slight risk for today In eastern Texas, away from the coast, that's where we're dealing with that highest risk of severe weather for today in those areas. And if we look at for tomorrow, we're dealing with that marginal risk, which covers much of Texas except for the area around Dallas, Fort Worth, and some of the surrounding areas there, and then also in the very westernmost part of the state. The everywhere else in the state of Texas looks to be covered within that marginal risk and has a fairly decent shot of being hit with some of these storms. Here is what the NAM model is showing, and we're going to time this out for you guys and give you a good look at what you should be expecting over the next couple of days. It looks like, again, we might get a break on Thursday. We'll have to see what exactly happens. We might get a break Wednesday night, Thursday. We'll have to see what happens on Friday. Most of the high-resolution models are not in yet, so we don't know exactly what will happen, but it does look like it's starting to die down. So we went through the brunt of it. We still have a couple more rounds, but we're definitely nearing the end of this rainy and stormy period in parts of Texas. Here would be what the expected radar is by 12 p.m. Central Time today. So pretty much right around when you're watching this, if just as I'm uploading this, and you can see that we have in north central Texas more of that rain continuing in those areas. What we're gonna see is that we're gonna have a first initial line, which actually does get quite severe in northeastern Texas, and then a few more storms in northwestern Texas that are gonna start to ramp up and get a little bit more intense minute by minute here. So you can see that by Tuesday or by tonight, right around 6 p.m., we're dealing with more of these storms into northeastern Texas. They are starting to split off and break off a little bit more, but these will still cause some flooding concerns because we're going to be dealing with heavy rainfall rates, and these will be moving fairly slowly. They'll be moving at a moderate or an average pace, which can still cause some flooding, especially with the already saturated ground. We already have so much water in the grass and just in the soil that any more rain is not going to sink into the grass like it will normally do. It's actually going to start to stick in puddles and just kind of stick on the grass. It's not going to really be absorbed just because it is so packed with all that rain that we already saw earlier this week. So there's going to be probably quite a bit of flooding because of all that saturated soil that we already have in these regions. Here would be by around 9 p.m. Tonight, Central Time, and we're dealing with these storms heading off to the east into northeastern Texas, and that would make the storminess pretty much go away for tonight. So that's going to be pretty much the end of the storminess for tonight, and then as we go into tomorrow morning, that's when we're going to start to get another round of storms. So here to be by Wednesday, very early in the morning, so around 3 a.m., and we're dealing with these with a fairly big line of storms moving through parts of northeastern Texas, and that is going to continue to roll through eastern Texas. We're now starting to see another round of storms into western Texas, and then of course you can see that bigger line of storms in eastern Texas. As we continue this forward, that starts to split off, break away further to the east. The main threats with that would be hail and also damaging winds at times, as well as the flooding concerns that we have because of the saturated soil and just the amount of rain that will be added on to these regions. Here to be by 12 p.m. tomorrow, and we're seeing multiple waves of these storms. So we can see one little hook here in southern Texas. We have another one into far southeastern Texas, and one more which is in north central Texas. So we have three different lines of storms that are fairly robust within themselves, and that's going to continue to roll through these regions probably for another 6 to 12 hours, and then eventually it will start to die down. And again, by probably Wednesday, in the late evening hours into Thursday is when it should start to die down. So this is by 3 p.m. on Wednesday, and we're dealing with these storms moving offshore in parts of southeastern Texas, so that is good. It is much better than what we were expecting yesterday. The NAM model yesterday had a big line of storms that formed all along the coast and then just went straight southeastward, and that would pretty much be the worst case scenario because, of course, we saw in the beginning of the video that that's the area that saw the most rainfall this week, so getting a huge storm on top of that is just not a good sight, and it would pretty much cover the entire coast as of what we were seeing yesterday. Luckily, it is breaking off into a couple more smaller, less intense bands of rainfall, but these are still going to be rather robust. You still do need to prepare for these storms, and then And that line of storms continues to head further to the east. It's starting to merge up with another one, which is further to the north into north central Texas, just south of Dallas. And then by Wednesday evening around 9 p.m., it is starting to die down. We're mainly just dealing with the threat of steady rainfall, which would cause, again, flooding concerns. But we're not dealing with much in the way of any more severe threats. So the severe elements of these storms have really died down into the evening hours of Wednesday. So we're not dealing with much in the way of hail, wind, tornadoes. Not much of that is expected by this point. The main concern would be that steady rainfall just sitting over some of these same areas, and you can see how slowly that line of storms moves. This would be by 12 a.m. on Thursday morning. Here would be by 3 a.m. and eventually it starts to quiet down and we go into a much quieter pattern. Maybe 1 or 2 more days of storms, but it's definitely going to be a lot quieter and a lot drier than what we were expecting or what we were seeing just a couple days ago. So here's the total rainfall out of this, and you can see it's quite a lot, especially into northern Texas, which actually hasn't seen an awful lot of rainfall. You guys have seen quite a bit of rainfall, but not to the point where it's causing these widespread areas of flooding like what we're seeing in southern Louisiana and coastal Texas. Now it's kind of your turn to get your fair share of rainfall, unfortunately. So now it looks like the bullseye is going to be somewhere within northeastern Texas, because you'll get hit with actually a couple rounds. You're going to see that first round, which heads through tonight, and then we're going to see another round, which is heading through early on Wednesday morning, and then maybe one more round later in the morning hours on Wednesday. So right around noontime, that's when the next round would come in. So you're going to be kind of in that pocket where you get hit with all three potentially of these events, and unfortunately that will potentially cause rainfall amounts to go up maybe to 5 to 8 inches in some localized areas. As a whole, generally it looks like it's going to be more of a 2 to 5 inch event in terms of the rainfall amounts in parts of eastern Texas, western Louisiana, southern Arkansas, southern Oklahoma. Also, don't forget about the panhandle of Texas, potentially over an inch up to 3 inches of rainfall or more in some of those areas. So definitely you want to pay attention to that if you do live within those areas. Here's the Cape values, the convective available potential energy for tonight, and you can see that we have in parts of southeastern Texas high amounts of Cape, up to 3,000, even closer to 4,500 or 5,000 in some of these areas. So that's well enough to get some of these storms to really fire up in these areas. Here would be by Wednesday or tomorrow, and you can see that we have some of these Cape values that are between 2,500 and about 4,500 in these areas. So that's quite high, especially in the southern half of Texas right there, and that could cause some storms to roll through those areas. Here is also the high temperatures, which is also going to be a big factor in this. We're going to be seeing high temperatures that are going to be in the 80s along southeastern and eastern Texas in general. As you get further west, it will be mostly in the 70s for those areas. So even in those areas, it'll still be warm enough to get some thunderstorms. That would be for today, and here would be for Wednesday or tomorrow. And you're dealing with much chillier temperatures or cooler temperatures in southeastern Texas. It will be mainly in just the low 80s to the upper 70s. But still, even if you're in the mid 70s, even the low 70s, that is enough to spawn up a couple of thunderstorms. So it's not really the temperatures that this is going to be thriving off of. It's mostly the dew points and the amount of energy that's in the atmosphere. Speaking of dew points, here is the dew points that we're expecting for tonight, and you can see that we have dew points over 70 in many of these regions in eastern and coastal Texas. So not a good situation there. That is going to help these storms fire up in those areas. And then if we look at for Wednesday, even higher dew points in parts of southern Texas, where we're dealing with dew points between about 73 and 76 degrees. So that is quite high, and that'll be one of the reasons and one of the main factors that we're going to be dealing with, and that's going to be one of the reasons that we're dealing with these storms. So that's going to be something that you want to pay attention to. The higher the dew points, the more the more energy and more that these storms can thrive off of. So these dew points are really going to help these storms start to develop and intensify in these areas. So that is going to wrap it up for today's video. Make sure you are staying safe with all these storms rolling around, and I'll see you guys in the next video. Goodbye.